ES Audio.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Delalio. Welcome to my rugby podcast. I'm delighted to have two very special guests with me this week. Later on, we'll be joined by the captain of Harlequins women's team and former England centre, Rachael Burford, as we take a look at all the action from the opening weekend of the Women's Six Nations. But first, I'm joined by a great friend and a great man. He's the man who played rugby for Leicester Tigers, for England, and of course the British and Irish Lions. And he went on to become England's first full-time professional head coach in 1997. And the rest, of course, is history. It is Sir Clive Woodward. Hello, Clive. Thanks for joining the podcast. Really appreciate your time. How are you, first of all?
I'm great. Thanks, Lawrence. And really good to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Look, there's lots to talk about. And, I certainly, for one, don't want to make our podcast with a former player who was lucky enough to be part of your team that won the World Cup and a former coach who won the World Cup, a current coach who won the World Cup in 2003. I don't want to make it a sort of an Eddie Jones witch hunt, because that's certainly not what it is, but we will we'll ask and answer the honest questions and hopefully try and put some perspective and balance on a lot of the discussion points that have been raging since the end of the Six Nations. The conversation around Eddie Jones and England's lack of performance certainly goes on and on. I read your piece in the Daily Mail. It was fairly honest and brutal assessment of some of the problems that exist. But before we get on to talk about EJ, I want to sort of talk about the whole kind of process and structure really in the RFU, because I don't think this is an appointment that the RFU have ever really got right since you stepped away, resigned, whatever you did in 2004. If we look at the appointments they've made, we've had Andy Robinson, who was, under your coaching team. We then had Brian Ashton, or it might have been the other way around, actually. It's been that long ago. We obviously had Martin Johnson, which is one of the most criminal things to appoint one of the best guys in rugby and then not to surround him with people who actually know what they're doing. And we've obviously had Stuart Lancaster. And in that period, I think England won one Six Nations title in 12 years, a very similar run to the one that France have had. So before they appointed Eddie, I'm not sure that this process has ever been run very well indeed. And do you think that's a fair assessment? Do you think the structure of how England appoint their coaches needs a complete review?
Yeah, first of all, I had to smile when Eddie Jones is now called EJ. You've got to be pretty good if you've now got initials, everyone knows who you are. So EJ, he's referred to as EJ. I mean, I'm CW then. So listen, I've lots to say about it. And to me, it's fairly straightforward. And, and I will try and be really careful what I say, because we're not trying to bash anybody here, but I just think you got to come back to, I don't blame Eddie Jones, or I don't blame Stuart Lancaster or anyone of the guys you met. It's the people who put them in there. I mean, the actual recruitment process for putting in, all those coaches from Andy Robinson, who, good friend of mine, Ashton, Jono, Lancaster. Fundamentally, it's done by the chief executive. Yeah. And the chief executive, and they're probably the two main figures in those years, are Ian Ritchie and Bill Sweeney. Both really good guys. Be very, very clear about that. But my issue with them is, that they're business people. There's nothing wrong with being a business person, but their knowledge of rugby is really small. But they seem to get these positions, and it's almost like a kid in a candy store. They suddenly feel now they're responsible for appointing the England coach, which they are. And my advice to both of them, and I had the conversation with both of them, and you can imagine it probably didn't go too well, was, if I was in your seat, if I was a chief executive of RFU, I would appoint a director of rugby who would take all this responsibility off me. The director of rugby who is qualified to talk about the England coaching position, how you go about selecting it, and also your job as director of rugby is to recommend to me and the board who that should be. You go away and do the actual process. And it just seems to me we keep, just to give an example, I don't think I've told many people this, I applied for the England coaching job, reapplied to go back when they appointed Stuart Lancaster. And that was Ian Ritchie was the chief executive. I didn't apply for the job. I got headhunted by, I can't remember the headhunter, but he said, Stuart Lancaster's going to be in it and Nick Mallett's going to be in it. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, I don't want a non-English coach. I like Nick Mallett hugely. I thought Stuart Lancaster won't get it because he's just never coached at any level. So I should get this job. So next thing I'm in a room with a bunch of people headed up by Ian Ritchie, and basically he just brought in a few rugby guys. And it was ridiculous. And then I got a call afterwards from the headhunter basically saying, well, but because you categorically said you wouldn't report into a director of rugby, you're not getting the job, and it's going to Stuart Lancaster, and so it's not Stuart Lancaster's fault. I mean, Stuart Lancaster fundamentally, but he didn't get us out of the group. I mean, he didn't a home World Cup, we don't get out of the group. So it's the appointment, and to me, you have to create a director of rugby position where, and that person could be the CEO, like Laporte is like that position. You could have that skill set, but neither Bill Sweeney or Ian Ritchie had the skill set to actually make the right decision on who should be the England next coach. You can have all the advice you want, but unless you're surrounded people who've actually got that kind of skill set, the chances are you're going to make the wrong decisions. And I think, it's not a case of making the wrong decisions. They made them with the best one in the world, but I would like a director of rugby to be totally responsible for that if the CEO hasn't got the skill set. And the director of rugby makes those positions, and it hasn't got to be English. I've heard today is going to be an England next coach. I think that's hugely wrong. Should be the best coach on the planet.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Ian McGeechan came out and said that England should appoint the best coach. Great if he's English, but don't worry if he's not. Although there is a stat, and it's sort of slightly warped by the fact that very few Southern Hemisphere teams will have a non-national coaching their team. But no team has won the World Cup being coached by a coach from another country. So that is
what I'd say that Lawrence, is if I was the director of rugby, I would say, I'm going to appoint the best coach on the planet. Deep down, I know there's a good chance that's good person going to be English, because I think we've got the right talent to be that. But I'm not going to appoint an English coach and then say everyone, well, you got the job because you're English.
Yeah.
I want that.
I totally
understand. Yeah. And don't get mixed up with, I love to this guy Scott Robinson from New Zealand. I'd love to speak to him about coaching, what he could bring. So I wouldn't be wed, but deep down, I'm agreeing with you. I think if we can get an English coach, fantastic. But I wouldn't be saying, that's my decision. Only one person makes that decision. Should be the director of rugby. I report to the board, chief executive Sweeney, Ian Ritchie. They've got and that's what Barron did so well. Francis Barron, out of all the chief executives, has been the best in my time. He kept away from the rugby really cleverly. He ran the business. He was tough on me. We had our moments, but he was fantastic. But he didn't get involved in the rugby. He allowed me to do my job. And I think that's where it starts and ends. And it probably goes across most sports. You get this chief executive role, suddenly it's almost like having a fan in charge of the team. And you're thinking, how can a fan pick the England rugby coach? And that's where I think they keep getting it wrong. And even now with the announcement there about it's going to be English, I think that's wrong. I think it's
they made a couple of announcements. They've put themselves in a corner now where if someone came forward who was the best qualified person for the job, they've kind of boxed themselves into a corner now because they've said it's got to be English. So I think that's wrong. They've also said that they're going to appoint that person before the World Cup, so that person can spend some time, being with Eddie Jones, which again I think is boxing themselves into a corner, because if that doesn't happen now, then you're almost holding a gun to your own head. But
also, Lawrence, just sorry to drop, but just England can win the next World Cup. Be very, very clear. They're just going through this patch at the moment, and they've handled the poor record really badly. I'm the last person saying Eddie Jones should go. Eddie Jones can win the next World Cup. So you win the next World Cup, he'll only be 64, 65. He may want to stay on. So why are you going to sack a guy who's won the World Cup or have him replaced beforehand? Because that leaves a huge amount of pressure. They've just assumed certain things. And again, I think they've just got it wrong, because I wouldn't be saying that. I mean, Jones is fundamentally, he's had a bad couple of seasons with the Six Nations. I think they've handled that bad results really, really badly, allowing the media, who we both work in, to have their say. And they've made some really strange statements about making sound progress. So they're going to cop some feedback, as I call it. We've all done it. I mean, I've copped loads of feedback, as I call it. So we've all been in that position. But to suddenly say the coach is going to change. Also, if you're in that team, you go, well, actually, after this World Cup, this guy's not going to be anyway. So we don't have to. I think it's a really wrong thing to do from a whole management point of view and a coaching point of view. And I would just, if you want to coach England, you'll be available. And if you don't, don't apply for the job.
Yeah, I just think there's been a succession of appointments, and I guess Martin Johnson's is probably the most obvious one to talk about, where you've got a guy who's just one of the most wonderful human beings. He's one of the greatest ever players, but he clearly never coached a team before other than playing in a team. And I remember him saying to me, he phoned me up, and I don't think I've ever told anyone this either, but he phoned me up and he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I think, have you ever coached before? He said, no. I said, well, you go and coach your daughter's team down on a Sunday, and if you haven't coached before, then you need to get a feel for one, whether you like it. And I think his view was that he wasn't sure whether he'd ever be asked to do the job again if he didn't accept it. And I get that. But I said, you have to make sure that you surround yourself with the right people, and you've got to go and persuade the people that you want, whether they're in a job or not, that they should join you on your journey. And I don't think he necessarily got the support from anyone within the RFU to be able to go and make that happen, because you can't just do it on your own. And I think it's just been a terrible tragedy, because he's clearly been burnt and quite wounded by that experience. I think he's got an enormous amount to give the game in terms of his intellectual property, but he wasn't answerable to it, or no one helped him who had international rugby experience. And I think, and we'll move this forward to Eddie Jones as well. Eddie Jones is a very capable coach, as we know. He's had success, in a lot of places, but inevitably he doesn't get every decision right. And I think he probably needs a bit of help and a bit of counsel from those, not people he wants to surround himself with, but people who might challenge and question whether it's a really good idea, for instance, to bring a load of players into an England squad who have got no chance of playing for England. We'll get onto it. He's going to stay until the World Cup, and fundamentally, he's been successful. He's won, 3 Six Nations titles. He's got us to a World Cup, final, and obviously we know what happened there. But in the last couple of years, I think he started to make some decisions, and his press conferences are, they're a car crash. He offends people that you're playing against. And he says things that, he used to be quite funny in press conferences, Eddie Jones. He used to be quite sparky, but I don't know where the comms plan is there. But I've never felt, as an England supporter, so disconnected from the England team as I feel right now. And I just want to know who is going to step in and actually challenge and ask those questions.
This is what I'm saying, Lawrence, is, first of all, Jono, I had the same conversation. He called me, and I just said to him, look, my professional advice is don't do it. Go and coach Leicester. Go and spend 4 or 5 years at Leicester. You will walk into the England job if you're successful at Leicester. You don't know whether you actually like this job yet. You've got to kind of learn your trade. But again, I don't blame Jono. The people at Twickenham gave him the job. And it was, looking back now, it's clearly the wrong decision, because there's so many things he had to actually learn. And I think, but this comes back to, there should have been a director of rugby. I'd like to know the director of rugby in the RFU who made that decision, because then you hold them accountable. Nobody knows who did appoint Martin Johnson. When they appointed Stuart Lancaster, I know who appointed them, because I was actually interviewed for it, but they didn't get the job, despite the fact of winning the World Cup. They appointed a rookie coach. But if those people should put their hands up, actually, that was me. I did that, because that would be quite interesting for the public to know who made those appointments. And the same with Eddie now. Just when he needs help, and the director of rugby isn't there to say exactly what Eddie Jones wants to hear. There's nobody I can see at Twickenham, nobody who can go to Eddie on a one-on-one and sit down and go, come on, this isn't right, this isn't working, question things in a real professional manner, because you're trying to help. And you just look at his coaching team compared with, that's where I think we've got some amazing players. England got the players who can win the World Cup. And I think we have the coaching team in this country, but I just look at them and I compare it with the French team, the Irish team, and you go, we're just behind on the coaching side, and it's just kind of drifting. And then when you start to actually have people in the RFU say, well, there's been some solid progress, you're going to copy it. And, I don't like seeing some of the stuff that there's been leveled at Jones, and I've had to be totally honest. I think what he's done is really kind of, I don't get it, and I'd love to be sitting down with him one-on-one as director of rugby and going, why? And then I can back it up in the media. So it's not just him, it's all him at the moment, and it's too much, because quite simply, There's no one at Twickenham who can sit down with the media, you and the media, and actually explain what's going on. And you just leave yourself quite exposed, and then they come out, and next thing you get is going to be English. Well, why are we even talking about that? Our mantra, and you remember this, Lawrence, I was absolutely, and you just learn this, the whole of Coaching England is about the next game. The next game is everything. Just everybody approach it. This is my last game for England as a player or a coach. It is the last game. No one talks about World Cups ever until the next game is the World Cup final. And then we got Bill Sweeney going, to me, if I was advising Bill Sweeney on Director Rugby, goes, the only thing matters is our next game against Australia in Australia in a few months' time. That's the only game matters. And if anyone talks about anything else, they're out. They're out. And we're going to win that first game. Because we lose to Australia next game, it really is going to kick off. And we've got a tough fixture. Talk about Australia, never mention the World Cup. Then you've got your chief executive saying, well, we think Eddie Jones is the right guy for the World Cup. Of course he's going to make the World Cup. He should make the World Cup because he's been there, almost got the T-shirt in 2019, almost got the job done. But I think, he got badly distracted because there was no director rugby around in that final week to actually pin him to one and go, guys, what are you doing? We're all over the place here. They've got the World Cup final. We're doing all this stuff, getting distracted. And you've got the South Africa team sat in their changing room, just sharpening the studs. We're in for a tough game here. And let's face it, we got smashed in the World Cup final. I've never seen a more one-sided World Cup final from that game. But there's never been a proper review because there's no director rugby who actually knows what he's talking about to actually say, this is why we lost, this is what actually happened, and it'll never, ever happen again. And I'm not sure they've learned those lessons.
Yeah, I can't disagree with a lot of that. I mean, just moving on to some of the things that are happening within the England side at the moment. I mean, you were the head of a very successful and talented coaching group of coaches that, you started the journey in 97. We won the World Cup 6 years later. So there was a journey. The first 2 years, we made a lot of mistakes. And we got bombed out of that 99 World Cup. I remember you handing my dad the credit card and saying, Vincent, don't hold back, don't spare the horses. This could be the last. This could be the last one. And I think my dad duly obliged and ordered a few bottles of Cheval Blanc. I said, Dad, Magnums. I said, it's
he did, Lawrence.
But obviously, Fran Cotton stepped in, a rugby man, as you mentioned, and you and everyone was given an extension of your contract and duly delivered. The coaching team grew and grew. You had guys like Phil Larder, Dave Allred, Andy Robinson, Phil Keith Roach, real Dave Redding, real experts in their field, and all English, actually, just by coincidence, but just so we're clear. I look at the current coaching setup, and I interviewed Eddie Jones, and I said to him, when he was on that run of 17 games when he first took over, and he, and they'd won 17 games, and I said to him, you're obviously going really well. I said, I just want to look back at your career. When you coached Australia, you took over from Rob McQueen, and you won the Bledisloe Cutback, and you got Australia to a World Cup final. I said, and you lost to our team by a drop goal in extra time, admittedly. But I said, then things started to go wrong. Why did things go wrong? And Eddie's direct response, and honest response, was, I stayed too long. I won't make that same mistake again. And here we are, 6 years into his tenure, and it's almost like history is sort of repeating itself, because he got to a World Cup final and lost again, and things, you've got to admit, have started to unravel a little bit. Now, I don't blame Eddie Jones, because if someone puts a contract under your nose and signs you sign an extension, you're there and you're going to take it. But you do feel like if you have a high turnover of staff, coaching staff, and I think I've lost count how many attack coaches England have had, and if you have a high turnover of staff, I can't possibly understand how the message can be a consistent one within the camp. And I think there's a real issue there with people coming in and out all the time.
Now, I was there 7/8 years, Lawrence, and I just built that coaching team. And we only made one major change, and that was John Mitchell. John Mitchell had to go back for family reasons to New Zealand. I like Mitchell, he's been really successful. And we brought in Andy Robinson. Outside of that, we just built. No one changed. And just to kind of bring it into, we have a reunion every year. And it was just in early December, we're at Cliveden. We had 30 people there. That was 15 couples. So 15 people of my staff. We meet every year. So you just can't see it happening with the current team because the turnover is so huge. So, but those were really handpicked, and these weren't Dave Allred. They're not yes men. I would back that team today against any coach team, including Galtier's team, especially the England team. We were way ahead, and I think we were then. We still are now, all those 20 years later, in terms of the knowledge of the team and how they operate. And back to being English, I didn't pick them because they're English. I picked them because I thought they were best. If I could find somebody who would come from outside English, I thought was better than someone who's English, I would choose them. But it makes a massive difference. And hopefully you saw that firsthand. I think the older we get, the more everyone realized how good that coaching team actually was. But also just one of the current points in terms of all the EJ, I call him EJ stuff. About these people going in, checking up on him. I just think that's the elephant in the room. It just kind of hit me the other day when I read that. Hang on a sec. If Francis Barron had called me up and said, you just lost a couple of games, we're going to send these people in to check up on what you're doing, I'd just say, just forget it. You either hire me or fire me. Do not think you're going to send somebody in to check on what I'm doing. I just wouldn't do it. Can you imagine Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola saying, actually lost 3 or 4 games and we actually get something? It's complete nonsense. And be fair, just so we're clear on Eddie Jones. When Eddie Jones arrived, I was his biggest cheerleader. I was leading the fan club, and it's been well documented. I fell out with Eddie, and say fell out with him, that final week of the World Cup final, where I could just see there was distractions everywhere, and I didn't like what I saw. Then I saw the World Cup final, then I got really annoyed because England should have won that. And you and me, we're massive on this. It's in our DNA. England should have won that World Cup final. They lost it, they got distracted. Then you see what happened the next couple of years. You start to actually go, whoa, he's lost the mojo here. He's lost what he was good at. And then you got to say it as you see it. You got to start to criticize them. But any top coach, I wouldn't allow anyone to come in and say start to see what I'm doing. You can have that. You want the job too much. And I just think, looking back, and also these people are all completely nameless and faceless. They won't even say who they are. I'm just going, this is just absolute. You talk about distractions. You're an England player. Who's this guy wandering around? Who's this? We have to know who's in the team, who's not in the team. I think it's just another massive mistake the RFU made because, again, no director of rugby who's totally accountable for the England team, the England coach. It's not easy. And this England director of rugby player, he's in a suit and tie in the committee box. He's nowhere near the team, but he is there to manage this England coach when he needs managing in that process of time. And I think that's what they're badly missing. And, Eddie's gone from, to me, a real hero and somebody who's, but when he started allowing these people to come in, I just got, come on. This guy isn't as tough as he thinks he is because he's allowing all these people to come all over his team. And I think that's what's causing a lot of confusion out there.
I've always felt that, my approach to being in the media, because, you want to praise people when they do well. And ultimately you have to ask the honest questions when things aren't going well. And I've always sort of taken this view that, and we used to have it with the players when they wrote newspaper articles, you can't write anything or say anything that you're not prepared to say to someone's face. And if you're prepared to do that, and look, I would question Eddie Jones on quite a lot of things really. And I'm just curious from a from a selection perspective, the England attack job should be one of the most coveted jobs in world rugby, right? It's one of the best jobs you can possibly have. Now, I know Martin Gleeson. I like him a lot. I just can't understand how a guy who's been in rugby union less than a year, if not maybe 2 years, 3 years, who is still learning his craft at Wasps under Lee Blackett, how he can be given one of the best jobs in the world straight away, having not really had much experience in the game. Now, there's no way Martin Gleeson's going to turn that down. They trebled his salary, the RFU, and suddenly he's working in an England environment. But you've got to question the process when the job is given to him. And the second point I would put to you is that, and I'd put this to Eddie Jones, the two things you need to build a winning culture, in my opinion, is trust and consistency. You have to trust people and you have to be consistent with the message you tell them. Now, I played 85 times for England. I'm pretty sure I wasn't man of the match in every game. In fact, I played some pretty poor games for England, but I had the trust of my coach and the trust that things would come right. And occasionally you have to put that trust on the bench once. but you do get the trust, and you've got to be consistent. And I don't honestly believe that Eddie Jones trusts people enough, and I don't think he's consistent with what he tells his players. And I'll give you many examples of that. There are players that have come into that squad, they've not delivered for whatever reason, and they've been ejected from the squad. You know, the Marcus Smith decision when England were winning, and he missed touch and he pulled him off. He just does not trust people. And I don't think you can build a everlasting, successful winning team if you don't trust people and you don't have consistent messaging. And I think Eddie's always searching for the next thing in the international game, which is very admirable, but he's searching for it before the players have actually understood what he told them in the first place. I
think also, Lawrence, I mean, that trust comes from, I mean, we're in an incredible win-loss record. I mean, I see all these stats. The only stat I look at is between World Cups. And if you compare what we did compared to what Eddie's doing now, I think that brings to light what you're doing. So between World Cups, I had about a year, maybe 2 years to actually learn all about what was going on. But between losing to the All Blacks, you may know that, not know this figure, between losing to the All Blacks in the World Cup in 1999 and then winning it in 2003, we actually played 47 games and lost 5. So our win-loss percent was 90%. Jones, to me, is in the same position. After 2019, he'd had 4 years to prepare, not 2. Now he's down to 70%. So there's something going wrong. He's way behind the 8 ball in terms of what's going on. That comes down to answer your point, your consistency in selection, where you're not making, you've got to be, selection is the biggest job, the biggest skill in this job, I promise you. It's the number one thing, and it's not easy. It's okay, everyone's saying, well, that's obvious, you pick the team. It's not obvious, because you're trying to find a team, not just to play Saturday, but you're trying to build this team. Can this team win a World Cup? And when I was doing this, my mindset was always, it's okay playing at Twickenham. This is a team, if I've got to go and win in Johannesburg, if I've got to go and win in Brisbane, if I've got to go and win in Auckland, which players do you want? You've got to find these tough players who are really skillful, but mentally, are they the right player? And we spend a lot of time on that. And there's just too big a transition. There's too big a turnover. We've all got our views on selection. But, I just, the selection for the French game, and we all said it, I just said it, and I don't regret saying it. I said, look, this to me, this selection, 9 times out of 10, we can't win this game with this team. 1 time out of 10, we may win on Saturday. Fingers crossed from an English point of view. I mean, you were there, we were there, pitch side. Let's face it, that game could have played 100 times, we'd lost 100 times. We weren't as good as France. Yeah. And it starts with selection. That's the number one thing. Then it starts with your coaching team. Can we bring in world-class coaches? Not just because they're English. I mean, Dave Allred, he's hard work, but he was the best by miles. Why is he not involved? The people like Andy Robinson were just amazing. And fundamentally, I think, Eddie's a good coach, but he may be like an Andy Robinson. He may be the guy to be a great coach. Is he the guy who can make the big calls on selection and create the culture, and so far since the World Cup, it's kind of just not happened for him. And we're trying to back him in many ways. And all I'm questioning that why is he allowing people to check on what he's doing? And who are these people? That's my big thing. And why is he allowing press statements to say go out? Go
just on selection, Clive. I'm just key on that, because I always think the England squad should be quite aspirational, and I get that I don't understand why you're bringing in players who are not going to be capped. We've picked 180 players, Eddie, for England, and 100 of them remain uncapped. And bringing players into an England squad is a big step. Especially if they're never going to play for England straight away. And sometimes that works well, and guys leave, and sometimes it works against that player. Take Jacob Bumanga, for instance, brought in to the England squad, and he sort of left the England squad, quite understandably, thinking he's the bee's knees, and he's never quite been the same player for Wasps ever since then. So I don't get that in my mind at all. I think the England squad should be a very special place, and only invited in there if you're good enough to play that week, quite frankly. And the other question I want to ask you is a lot of people seem to say to me that I'm a little bit outdated in terms of shirt numbers on the back, but I see us behaving like France used to, where they chop and change their team every time they win or lose a game. And, they can afford to do that because they've got so many good quality players. And then you used to see the French team sheet announced and you used to think, oh, I can't believe it. They've picked the world's best number 9, but they've picked him at 10. And they picked the world's best number 8, but they picked him at 7. And used to just laugh and used to think to yourself, thank God they've done that, because there's absolutely no chance they're going to win. And I think France are behaving like England now, where there's a consistency in their selection. They've got themselves marginally fitter. They need to get a lot fitter. They're picking the right players in the right positions. They've obviously developed some world-class players. And I think, if anything, England are behaving like France, where we chop and change our team. We pick players out of position that doesn't work. And there is very little connection with the supporters who, by the way, pay a lot of money, myself included, for tickets to Twickenham.
Yeah. But you go back to my point, selection's everything. And I think it's the biggest skill. Again, who really can go into Eddie Jones's office, sit down, shut the door, one-on-one, have a cup of tea and question his selection? Who are all these unnamed people? They're going in, checking up on data and how quick ruck ball is, all that. Look, I can see how quick ruck ball is just by using my eyes. I don't need data and sports science. So all these people who haven't got a clue on coaching, getting involved in the team, kind of trying to justify why Jones is there. But really just need someone who can actually get down and go, why do you pick, this guy on the wing, this guy at fullback? I mean, what happened to Max Malins? I thought he's a superstar player, Malins, and he's just suddenly gone. And there's no reason why he should be gone. He's another one just gone. And you've got to know your team. You've got to keep with that selection. And he hasn't. And I think what happens also, I lived in Australia for 5 years. I mean, I actually played against Eddie Jones. And he was this tough kid from Ramwick. And he was a tough kid. You can remember him now. And he's coming over to Manly, which is kind of the posh part of town, and playing against all that lot. And I just think, his whole background, he likes big, tough players. He likes size. And I don't think that's ever changed. Deep down, he comes back to size. And that's why I think we have Maro playing 6 and Laws playing 6. I don't get that, because I think Laws has been amazing this season. He should be starting second row along with Maro and Toje. And you just kind of build from there, but just keep it. Once you've got those players, don't change them. Once I know you're playing number 8, Lawrence, you're playing number 8, we just keep this going. And it's only if you're injured or have a real catastrophic loss of form, you can't do it. Our team, the country could have named that team 2 or 3 years out from the World Cup, give or take 1 or 2 positions. And then it's up to me to make the big calls. I had to make massive calls, as in the front row, to go with kind of Woodman and Vickery and sort of have on the bench, Jason and Roundtree. These are massive calls, but no one argued with them because everyone's in the squad. We just don't know the starting team. And I think it's the number one skill of any top coach. And when you lose games, at least leaves you totally exposed. And I passionately don't believe in the starters, finishers, because I think that's confused everyone as well. I think it's really caused confusion in the players. And you think, well, I'm not in the starting, but I'm a finisher, so I'm just as good as these guys. You got to know I'm in the team or not in the team. And I come back to, I picked every team based on Saturday will be my last game. Every game, this is my last game in charge, so I'm going to win this game. And that's what I think players want. So you're picking your best team. England isn't a development team. It's not there to develop players. You're there to win on Saturday. And that's all everyone wants. We want to win that next game against Australia. I don't care about World Cups. That will come as soon as it's ready. What I do care is being in Australia on Saturday and not having any excuses at all. And as simple as that. And that's what I think we've lost with Eddie at the moment. So I think he used to be like this. For some reason, he's just got too comfortable in his own skin at the moment. And,
if you don't have people that challenge you, then you are going to get comfortable. I mean, you and I and many other England players used to challenge each other. I remember going into Warren Gatland a couple of times, and after a press conference and saying, "Yeah, thanks for that." And he'd look at me and go, "What's that?" I said, "Well, you're not the one getting your face smashed in at 3 o'clock. So exactly. There's absolutely no way we're going to do that." And, I just think he needs that challenge. Look, we're going to talk in more detail, and I want to ask you some questions from some of our listeners, because there's some really fascinating questions. But before we do that, I want to bring in Rachael Burford, who has been waiting very patiently in the waiting room, because she's going to come and join us. Rachael, good afternoon to you. Thanks for coming in. Really, really appreciate it. I know that the women's game is also taking centre stage at the weekend with the opening round of Six Nations games, and I'm delighted that you've come here to join us. I think you were a bit of a trailblazer for women's rugby, 84 caps for England. You played in 4 World Cups, which is incredible, also lifting the trophy in 2014. So I couldn't think of anyone better qualified. First female professional rugby player who's been brought in as part of the RPA Players Committee. And I'm assuming, Rachel, that you were up in Edinburgh. You watched the game. England obviously got off to a fantastic start in the tournament. They won quite comfortably. Was it nine tries to one in the end? I felt sorry for Scotland, but they were very brave. They didn't give up. I think that takes the winning run to 19 games now for England. So they're hunting down the All Ferns record of 24. But give us your impressions of the opening round of Six Nations women's rugby.
Yeah, it's great to be here. So thanks for having me on. I think the opening round, we probably saw all the teams that you expect to win this weekend. And I think England got off to a really good start. The scoreline, I think, flatters him a little bit. I think there's a lot that they'll be thinking. They didn't quite get into their strides, really. It was quite a stop-starty game. And I think they'll be disappointed that they couldn't string for more than kind of 3 or 4 phases together at times. But the place in the area that they were absolutely brilliant was in the opposition's 22. So every time they entered into there, they came away with points. So that will be really pleasing. The set piece was really good. But I think overall, they probably expected a bit more from themselves. And they were quite lateral. And I just think, we're considering the talent that they have and the pack that they have, they could have been, it could have been more on the scoreboards for sure.
You obviously have been a huge part of that Red Roses setup, and I don't think the result or the scoreline was necessarily a great surprise. You know, this is England have got some amazing players right across their squad. What is it that's made that happen? You know, is it because, you know, for those of you who don't know, women's rugby players, and you know, they are professional, but they're not paid anything like what they should be paid. And is it just the work ethic? You know, what is it? I mean, it's obviously good coaching as well. And I'll bring Clive in a minute, because I'm sure he's been invited to coach some of the women's sessions as well. But what is it that's made this team, this group of people, so successful? Is it that legacy that they're building on what you guys started, or what do you think it is?
Well, I think a lot of what's being underpinned at the moment is the domestic league. You know, albeit not being a paid league, but a very semi-professional setup in terms of facilities, coaching, and then the level of games that are played week in, week out. You know, arguably some of those players will say that they've played in harder domestic games than the Scotland game at the weekend. So that's a massive factor to it. Naturally, being professional allows you to completely dedicate your time to play full time and to be able to rest and recover. You know, so those two things hand in hand. But you know, as you mentioned about coaching, the England setup is really well resourced. The time that they had together, the time that the coaches being full time, 3 of them, allows them to keep their players all year round at the domestic league as well. And they're blessed with some really, really good, talented players that have had more opportunities growing up to then kind of step into the international scene, you know, not be unfamiliar because of the domestic league. This is such a highly competitive environment that when they go into the international scene, of course it's going to be a step up, but actually they're familiar with a lot of stuff. So I think it's an element of a couple of things, but definitely really well resourced, the fact that they're professional and the domestic league that underpins it. And
obviously that some standout players for our listeners who don't necessarily know. Obviously, Marley Packer scored a hat-trick at the weekend and was the sort of star of the match. Obviously, we know about Abigail Dow. I saw her try. That was amazing. Great to see Emily Scarrett back after breaking her leg, and obviously included. I mean, obviously England players, but also maybe across the Six Nations. Who are the sort of stars for us to look out for?
I think we've got a number of young talent coming through as well. So Maud Muir, who's a young Wasp prop, you'll be happy to hear. She's broken into the fold this season, and she's just been outstanding. You know, she's only 19, I think, and she's playing beyond her years, but still got so much to grow. There's been some new finds also within Italian side, a player called, I think it's, my pronunciation isn't great, and I literally have never seen her and saw her play yesterday and was like, bloody hell, where's she been hiding for Italy? She's the number 12 for them. But a player that people need to watch out for is Laurie Sansus for France. She's like a Dupont. You know, she is a game changer for them. everything is run through her. She only played 20 minutes at the weekend, but completely changed how France finished the game. So there's a couple of players just to kind of look out for, especially Ward Muir being a young player within that side.
And I'm pretty sure that there was a record crowd up in Edinburgh. Was it over 4,000, 5,000? I mean, I think that's great to see. I know that the fans are desperate to get behind the Red Roses when they play at home as well. I think the game, the women's game is finally getting that kind of deserved progress in terms of media coverage. I've just wondered what sort of boost do you think that gives the players, and what more would you like to see? I know it's quite a big question, but what more would you like to see done to really further enhance the women's game? Do they need better contracts? Do they need more support financially? I will forward this on to Bill Sweeney, so we can get him. I'm sure he'll be an avid listener anyway, with Clive and I maybe making some helpful suggestions on how they want to run the men's team, let alone the women's team. But what would you like to see done better or more of to really grow? And appreciate that things happen in little steps, and I think the women's game has taken quite a few of those. But what else would you like to see?
Well, I think from an English point of view, we're in a really good place. Our domestic league's good, going really well. International contracts, of course, could they be paid more? Could there be bonuses, incentivizers, those kind of things? Yes, I believe so. But I think in order really for the game to grow, and in order for the England women's game to be able to grow, we need everybody else to catch up. There's no point having 2 or 3 unions that are really invested and behind their women's teams, because that doesn't bring in, excitement, jeopardy. Like it's obvious who may win. It's too predictable. And I think unless other unions come up in the same way that England, France, New Zealand, now we're seeing Wales do the same, unless we see that more across the board, we're going to have a very predictable 3 or 4 teams in the running for everything. And I think that's probably such a broad thing for me to say, but until we have other unions catching up, the top can't continue to elevate, because, commercially, sponsors, TV broadcast, when they know it's a 2-horse race, there's not much excitement around that.
And Clive, someone who obviously has coached the men's team, have you taken any of the sessions with the Red Roses in the past? Was there a bit of cross-pollination or swapping of ideas? I don't suppose there was then, but what's your impression of the way that the Red Roses have developed and grown?
I think the question I'd like to ask Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Obviously, well done in everything you've done in your rugby career. And obviously, we speak to Maggie a lot on the women's side, which is fantastic. How is it going on the coaching side for women? Obviously, I'm just interested in these club sides. How is there a real pathway for a female coach coming in and going to the top? Because it just seems to be dominated by male in these coaching positions.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and hello to you too. It's something that World Rugby have got quite a few initiatives to try and help accelerate women in high performance, and coaching being one of them, and administration and leadership. One of the difficulty things I would say is like, there's a lot of us who are kind of, you come to your end of your career and then you might step into coaching, but we've not had any kind of opportunities to coach whilst you're training and playing, because it's still amateur. So it's the evenings, it's the weekends where you don't get the opportunity to then go and coach. So then say, let's example, for me to then maybe go into a role like that, I'm going to need some years experience actually coaching on the ground, running a program, etc. So then it takes a little bit longer for women to get into those pathways. But I certainly think there's an area where clubs could invest in some players that they may see coming through, female players coming through, to actually get that pathway going. Because at the moment, there's very few that have those opportunities. And those jobs, there's not many of those kind of head coach role jobs available, But I'd say in our Allianz Premier 15, we've actually been quite surprised and fortunate. We've had a number of female coaches be at the top, Jo Yap at Worcester, Giselle Mabra at Wasps, Kim Oliver, former international, used to coach at Bristol. So there are some opportunities, but we don't have like a conveyor belt or a number of players, or not necessarily just players, but people outside the game that want to be involved. That's an area of pathway, because it's certainly working in our domestic game where we've got more female coaches involved. But when you look across the international, there's only one female head coach in France. So that's an area that we need to see for going from a domestic into the international.
Yeah, Rachel, I just come in. I was asked. I sit on an IOC committee, and they asked me to set up a commission around women's coaching, because I won't ask you the question, but on average, the last 4 Olympic Games, less than 8% of the accredited coaches are female. So the Olympics have done an amazing job in getting the numbers up. In most Olympic Games now, there's 50-50 athletes, male, female. There's less than 8%, and it's the next female coaches across all sports. I have to say, rugby gets a good rap. In the reports I've seen, World Rugby really is trying to do something about it. But I was just seeing whether it's coming through on your ground. So I'd love to see you going into coaching, like all ex-players. That's, to me, would be my dream. But there really is a pathway for female coaches to come in, go all the way to the top and sit as a real career move, and not something that's holding you back at all. And I think that's the next big step across most sports, by the way, not just rugby, but because I say less than 8% of coaching positions at Olympic Games are female. But I think it makes a huge difference when on the TV you see female coaches talking to the players and the team, and just the whole image of the game, I think, goes to a whole new level to the female sport.
Well, we certainly had at Wasps for many years Giselle, who is currently coaching the women's team, and I think she could coach the men's team quite comfortably. She's certainly someone who doesn't take any prisoners at all. Rachel, really appreciate your time on that, on the Women's Six Nations. We'll obviously be keeping right across the Red Roses throughout the tournament, and we'll get more reaction from yourself as well. Just want us to, I want to put some questions to both of you actually, but to Clive, particularly on the England team. But before we do that, we have something called Outstanding, and I'll go to you first, Rachel, just to pick out an outstanding sort of player from the weekend. Obviously, you can be very biased and make it a women's rugby player from the Six Nations tournament, or it could be from the Premiership, where I was lucky enough to be at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and I was also down at Sandy Park watching the Tigers. But Rachel, if I start with you, who was I mean, obviously Wales had that wonderful win, 27-19 against Ireland, and England 9 tries. I mean, Marley Packer was named the outstanding player, but would you care to put anyone else forward?
Look, I think Marley had a great game. I think Sarah Byrne had a good game, but I think I mentioned her earlier, Sansus from France. I just think the impact that she had in 20 minutes on the game, 4 line breaks, made 74 metres, 5 tackles, to be that influential in 20 minutes, I would say that she was outstanding. And I would say her again, so people are looking out for her.
Brilliant. Well, as you said, I was, that's a very good choice. I was at Saracens Bristol Showdown, which saw the return of Owen Farrell, a very welcome return after 4 months out injured, even though the press seemed to jump straight down his throat for a pretty insignificant no-arms tackle, quite passive tackle, but that's what happens when you're Owen Farrell, I guess. But my outstanding player really is more of a mark of respect, goes to Jamie George, who played his 250th game for Saracens at the weekend. In the modern professional era where players are incentivized to move elsewhere, I think to see a one-club man, I think he's been at Saracens since the age of 8, and he's a bit of a throwback, really, to what rugby players used to be, but also has sort of become very, very professional as well. He's won everything in the game, and as I said, he's 31 years of age. He's obviously had a year in the Championship as well, so he's even got that in his CV. And I just thought it was great to see him run out 250th. He's well loved by the opposition. He's well loved by his own teammates and fans, and I think he's my outstanding player of the weekend. Clive, I know you're right across club rugby these days. You would have even had it tuned in on Mother's Day yesterday. So who's your outstanding?
Only to see you, Lawrence. You know that.
No. You don't need to see me. You definitely don't need to see me.
To me, you mentioned him. It just, I mean, I'm a massive fan of Owen Farrell, and I think it's a real interesting. I just remember, now I'm working in the media. But the best under Eddie Jones England have ever played. We had Farrell at 10, Manu at 12, and Slade at 13. When they went away to Ireland and won, it reminded me first time our team. And to see him playing yesterday again, what he brings to the team. But I'm pretty sure Eddie's going to play him at 12, and I'm just saying it's a big call between him and Smith, but that's a great rivalry now because they're very, very different. But just watching him come back and play, he's just this tough guy. And you've got an amazing lead, amazing captain. To me, he's 10 or nothing. I just don't think you can go to the next stage in England with him playing in inside centre, outside Smith. You've got to go to Fowler or Smith, or one on the bench, one starting. But I thought he was fantastic, and it's almost his body language when he hit that shoulder, and everyone's getting nuts about that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, it's passive. I mean,
he's almost protecting himself. I mean, crikey. Get these big lumps running at you. You just got to get your shoulder in the way. You can't wrap your hand on. You're going to get.
Well, thankfully for Owen, the TMO was having a bit of a snooze at the time. Anyway, in fact, he was having a snooze for most of the game. I thought actually. So, and as I said, always prepared to say it to their face. Anyway, that's that. Clive, I want to throw some questions at you because we haven't got long now, and appreciate both of your time. We've got our listeners, Kirsty B. What change? I mean, assuming Eddie Jones is going to be the coach until the World Cup, and he is, and I think everyone understands that. What changes do you think England could implement? Good question, this, to be in with a chance of winning or even getting past the group stage in 2023, because there's every chance that there's a lot of games between now and the World Cup final. We could easily be playing France in a semi-final. We've got a tough group to negotiate. Now Eddie's there. He's going to be there for the next couple of years. What can England implement in 2 years or 18 months to give us the best possible shot? If there was 2 or 3 things that you would implement straight away, what would they be?
Yeah, first of all, he should be there. Be very clear. I think what you've been saying and I've been saying about Jones is I just think he needs some help. He needs someone to pin him to the wall and go, look, what the hell's going on here? No one's saying fire him, but we are questioning big time some of the things he's doing. I mean, even the kicking game, which he seems to be pretty big on, the kicking game, his kicking game seems to me, his strategy is to box kick. And I can never understand this, because you're box kicking, you're not kicking the ball very far away. You're giving the opposition, 50-50 go at the ball. Why would you do that? And to me, I think, and also, we haven't got a kicking coach in our squad, as far as I know, unless there's someone I don't know about.
It's Johnny Wilkinson, isn't it? I think, doesn't he do?
I think Johnny works with Marcus Smith and does some kicking at goal, but I don't think he works with the whole team. There was that time in the French game. I'm just remembering this guy's name, who's the Vlok Casilias. They've got a South African kicking coach who comes in from Joburg to work with the French team. There was a moment where Smith kind of grubber kicked it through. Dupont was amazing, just picked it up on the run. He just smashed the ball length of the field, like going, okay, you've had your moments, just bang, whack it down the field again. I'm not advocating we changed, from the approach that we'd like to have about the speed of ball, but there's times you've got to kick it. Every back's got to kick it. We don't have a kicking coach. If we're going to kick it, let's hoop the ball, the length of the field, put a chase on and try and get the ball back and then play. I think we just box kick far too much. And I promise you, for those listeners, and the game hasn't changed. It's funny how people say to me, Lawrence, well, it's changed since you. It hasn't changed since I played, which was when the TVs were seriously in black and white. I mean, it was a long time ago, but the game hasn't changed. Why do you want to kick the ball away unless you're going right downtown? So that'd be the first thing. 2, the speed of the ball. It's got to be improved. And I'm not a big fan of less than 3 seconds or all this. I can see the speed of the ball. By the time the first guy gets there, hasn't got to be number 9. The first guy moves the ball one pass. Can we really get some development around that? And the third thing, just the continuity of selection. I just wish now, 18 months out, I could write down 15 names. There's the England 15 that's going to play the opening World Cup game in 18 months' time. And if there's a change to it, it should be headline news going, wow, why has he done that? We haven't a clue who the starting 15 is. And that's a real worry, because I don't think you can go up again. And also, the last thing I'd say, that World Cup in 2019 was okay. We're all there. I enjoyed it. The World Cup in France in a couple of years' time, the quality of the teams is going to go up. France are a different level, Ireland are a different level, Scotland a different level. The Southern Hemisphere is not going to get hijacked by the Northern Hemisphere. It's going to be the best quality teams ever. It's chucking Argentina way above 2019. So we need to be, smell the coffee now. We've got to do some real radical things here. And I think Jones is the right guy to coach the team. We just need some flipping help and someone to say, come on, stop all the media stuff. Just get back to coaching the team. It's about winning. And all I want to win is that next game against Australia. Nothing else. Don't talk about anything else, about England coaches, anything else. New England, bloody starters, finishers, you name it. Just get your starting 15 out there and play the game, and just get back to fundamentals of coaching a rugby team.
I don't disagree with that, and they could do with improving their the way that they present the England team to the media. Really, the only person I've ever heard from is Eddie Jones and occasionally Courtney Laws. I really want to know and get to learn and appreciate some more players in the team and put them in front of the camera, because that's how they grow and develop as
But that's kind of a sideshow, Lawrence. That's what we like to do.
I know it's a sideshow.
Want to win a game, do what I just said, those first 3 or 4 games. Rachel knows I'm right. I can tell from her face.
Now, listen, I'm going to ask Rachel. I mean, obviously, we've got another question from Jared Ingalls, who's saying, if everyone was fit, who would be in the starting 15 for the England men's team? Now, Clive has made it very clear that, that he likes number 7s to be picked at number 7, like I do. Tom Curry, if he's fit, is the best number 7. Don't pick him at 8. I didn't like playing 7. I like playing number 8. I thought I'll play 7 if Clive's stupid enough to pick me there, but I really don't want to play there.
I know you haven't played you at 7.
No, you didn't, actually. You weren't actually. No, Jack Rowell did, though, to be fair. But on the backs, Rachel, everyone has their say, and that's what makes rugby so interesting. Are you a Owen Farrell or Marcus Smith? And there's nothing wrong with having a player like that coming off the bench. And it does seem like, that 12 position, and people keep telling me that maybe I'm out of date, and if you don't play 12 every week, it's very easy apparently just to slip into playing 12 every week. But I don't believe it is, because I know if I don't play in number 7 every week, it's not easy just to suddenly start playing there. But is there anyone glaringly obvious that we've left out of the England setup, or you think might come through in the next 18 months in that back line?
And specifically in the 12 position?
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's wingers like, Johnny May and all these guys who will come back into contention. There's a few injuries, clearly. I won't mention the word Manu, but if everyone's fit, I know we do. And he's fully fit, and we could rely on him. We'd have him in there at 12, no problem. But Marchant's done an okay job at playing in that position. I can't believe he absolutely loves it there. Doesn't like taking the ball to the line. I just wonder whether you've got any particular views on that. Is it easy for fullbacks to switch to playing on the wing straight away? And if Freddie Stewart's the best fullback, should he just be left at fullback? If Max Malins is the best fullback, keep him in the squad. I don't know. I mean, I'm just.
It's an interesting debate, isn't it, about getting your best players on the pitch and playing them slightly out of position. But I can appreciate that sometimes, but I personally think you need to play people in their positions that they're the best at. Yeah. But I think it's I don't know. I don't have the answer for this 12 spot. I think who's the Bath 12 at the moment?
Well, I think one of the big issues that we've got is that only about 9 of the players playing regularly in the Premiership were English qualified in the centre positions, and that is a big problem. And that's one that Clive tried to change. And I don't think we can even blame Eddie Jones for that either. But obviously, the word Mark Atkinson springs to mind, but he's got no chance of getting picked. So, maybe
what about Andre? Has he got any links to England?
No. Sadly, he's played for South Africa already, and he's by far the best player in that position. I mean, Clive, do you see? Is there anyone outside of the current setup, playing wise, that you'd like to sort of see fast tracked in the next 18 months? I know you were quite radical with certain selections, and then the team settled itself down and picked itself really. But I mean, is there anyone that's been left out that you'd like to see in, or who's in that you'd like left out?
I think a couple of things I would have done by now. I think Manu at his best, obviously in the team, but you need a backup for him. You need Manu times 2. So the 2 thing I think would have happened if I'd been in charge for the last few years, we would have had a couple of guys from Rugby League come over. I'd have actually gone out and made that happen. I think there's some amazing, and don't start saying Sam Burgess at me. Don't start shouting it. Say Jason Robinson, not Sam Burgess. So I'd have found somebody to come and give it a go with no guarantees, but we could have worked with the clubs to get a couple of players in. I quite like Lazowski from Saracens. I think he's really underrated, but he doesn't look physically big. I think he's a really top player. And I think if you were definitely playing Farrell at 10, Lazowski can definitely play there. And then I just think Slade's 13. And I agree. I mean, Rachel should be on selection. She should be chairman of selectors, because she's absolutely right. You can't play international rugby out of position at the top level. The higher up you go, the more World Cup finals, World Cup semi-finals, you've got to be comfortable in your own skin where you're actually playing. And if you are going to change people's position, you've got to give them a long run at this. You're going to give them a whole series of games and not just stick someone on the wing or move from fullback. I thought the experiment from you, Stuart is obviously a great player, but he should be playing fullback. And in the centre, there are various players. De Glanville, I think, Rachel, you talk about the young lad from Bath. He's a good player. But I watch it, not so much live, watching on TV. So if I was England coach, you'd know all this information. But I think there are, of course, there's players. We've got the whole of our playing base. You just got to make sure you find that player and stick your reputation on the line. This is the guy I think can actually do it, and you got to go from there. But I think there is a talent, but you can't keep chopping and changing. But no one knows. No one's got a clue who's going to play at Australia at 9, 10, 12, 13, which is pretty key. And we just don't know who's going to play there.
Yeah. Well, listen, we could go on for hours, and I appreciate that there's probably a load of questions that I haven't asked, and we would love to discuss and debate. But I think we're all in agreement that Eddie Jones is going to take England forward. He just needs a little bit of help, maybe on selection and one or two other little key areas. Maybe media liaison would be another one. It helps if you don't insult the opposition before you play against them. That's a general rule number one in most international coaching. Tends to backfire on you, really, and especially if you're the one not getting your face smashed in at 3:00. So I definitely maybe push some of his players forward to take the media interviews, and let's hear from the personalities behind the team. But listen, thank you to you both. That's all for this episode. I want to say an enormous thank you to Sir Clive Woodward and to Rachael Burford for being my special guests. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, give us a like, leave a review, and share this episode with your friends. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.